Welcome to Dockside Magic, where we talk about flavor and functionality in the competitive commander format. I'm your host Isaac, accompanied by my brother Aaron. Today we're going to be talking about one of his personal decks.
How we doing? Honored to be here. This is going to be super fun. We're rocking mono green in a partner commander setup. These two commanders paired together do green's best functions, right? When you think green, me personally, I think of big creatures, I think of big mana, and we're going to use both of those combined together to do some wild things. Let me read these partners real quick. We have Gilanra, Caller of Wirewood, 2 and 1 green, legendary creature, elf, druid, tap, add 1 green. When you spend this mana to cast a spell with converted mana cost 6 or greater, draw a card. Kodama East Tree, the opposite portion of this partner setup, 4 and 2 green, legendary creature, spirit. It reads, reach whenever another permanent enters a battlefield under your control. If it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent card with lesser or equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. Absolutely wild mechanics, super, super fun. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the functionality of the deck and how we use these mechanics to just do some absolutely wild things.
Yeah, I can confirm, having played against this deck, it's an absolute freight train once it actually gets going. It's like take a wagon at the top of the hill, and it's just waiting to have all 4 wheels put on, but as soon as all of those wheels are on, it's going to roll really fast, and it's going to do it at an impossible rate to stop.
I'm not sure I could have summed it up better myself.
So diving into the introduction of everything, Aaron's going to kind of go over a lot of the key points of the deck, what the deck strives to do, how it gets there, what are some of the key pieces it uses to get there, and just kind of giving us all the value and interlinking all the pieces in a very in-depth deck tech, so that all of the viewers, like yourselves, can kind of see how this steam engine actually gets rolling.
I don't know, man. I kind of like death tech. I think that might
Death
be more
tech, yeah.
applicable.
If it's a 2-hour video, we'll stick with death tech.
Cool. So the idea behind the deck is to ramp, draw, sink all of that mana into something that is, a value piece, and continue to do so until you find a mana sink and win the game.
So I got a question for you. Like, obviously, you've mentioned that this is a cEDH deck.
Sure.
At what power level do you think you'd rate it?
Sure, I would give this deck a 9. Now, normally I would say 9 would be like a top-end high power type, or maybe on that same kind of fringe category of being right in between high power and cEDH. I do classify this as a cEDH deck. I would say that in a pod of cEDH decks, I wouldn't want to be playing necessarily a mono green deck against a bunch of people who don't have any interaction. I would say that there's, at a table, there's usually room for one place of someone who's playing some kind of monocolored deck, say that's not blue. Obviously, that's just my opinion, but it does make the politics in the interaction portion of the game interesting, because this is the definition of a gas pedal. There's very little interaction, there's very little protection, none of which is very efficient at all. It is just all gas. You are taking straight fuel and dumping it into your engines and trying to get as much performance out of it as you can as soon as physically possible, which does make it fun. I mean, there's a little bit of chaos to it too.
Right. I mean, I think I can even confer, like, being on the receiving end of the destruction that this deck can ensue quite often.
Sure.
I definitely see it as a 9 as well. It's like that 9 minus. Like, the ceiling of it is absolute, like, a devastating, like, extremely powerful 9. And then at certain points, it's mono green. It has its extreme limitations. So that's where that kind of minus comes into play. Sure. But nonetheless, like, it is a cEDH deck. It does its thing, and it does it proficiently. And so much can happen in one turn that it's like near impossible to stop.
When it hits hard. Hoof hard. Let's go ahead and dive right into the beginning of it, shall we? We talked for a brief moment about the one partner, the Gilanra portion. It is an elf, which is very pertinent to this deck. A lot of how we go about making mana, or infinite loops of getting green mana, revolves around having a certain amount of elves in the battlefield. So Gilanra is a key portion, not only for the fact that the card is a dork itself, but it's also an elf. One thing to briefly mention, the green that I do get from Gilanra from tapping it, if it's used to be put into a spell with 6 or greater, I can draw a card. So if I have an ability to tap or untap this creature a bunch and sink a cumulative amount of this green into something, I can draw more than one card. And that's kind of one of the engines of the deck, is to be able to tap and untap certain portions of certain mechanics to give me the max efficiency out of these engines.
Yeah, like with Gilanra, I mean, that has to be one of the only commanders that's a mana dork, right? Like, are there many others? Am I overseeing?
There's a couple that go into different portions of mana manipulation, but as far as one that's like a straight dork like this, I don't know of many, if any.
It's definitely the only partner commander that is a mana dork, and I definitely think it's the only commander out there that is a dork and can draw you cards.
It's definitely the only one that I care about right now.
Right, for sure.
Right. So let's go ahead and start into how I tried to create the deck to get these engines online as soon as possible. So Gilanra, you got to be able to play Gilanra turn 2, period.
And your mulligans will reflect that. I was just going to
say, you have to go down until you find a dork or a possible way to ensure that you get Gilanra out turn 2.
Sure. What do those look like?
Let's dive right in. Let's go ahead and go with the dorks. I do love my elves. Let's go ahead and blow through the elf dorks real quick. We've got a pretty basic...
The dork package.
Standard package here. We have Arbor Elf. We've got the Llanowar Elves, Findhorn Elves, Elvish Mystic, Boreal Druid. Only thing to note is Boreal Druid, it is an elf, but it only taps for a colorless. And Arbor Elf doesn't tap for a mana. You tap it to untap a target forest, which is kind of interesting and leads me into the next portion, because if I do get a forest out, and I have the other ramping portion in the enchantment section being Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl, both 1 CMC, both being green, I can put it on a forest and tap it for an extra green. So there's some kind of fun things that you can do with Arbor Elf. You can get both of these on a forest and tap for a little extra. I've got Elvish Spirit Guide. Honestly, man, I'd say this is kind of a pet card. There's just some really cool things that you can do with it. Some politicking, some secretive type stuff that makes the game really fun. That little extra little green seems to always come when it needs to. And I've got Birds of Paradise. Elves are super, super critical, but I know Birds of Paradise is not an elf, but being able to get Gilanra out turn 2 is more important than birds being an elf, so it is definitely in here. I don't have Chrome Mox, and I don't have Gemstone Caverns in here. Super great for ramping purposes, but at the cost of a card, it's not worth it. It's just not.
Right.
This deck is so draw hungry. I had it in the original design, play tested it 20 times at least in actual gameplay, and it was just it wasn't worth it at all. Decided to axe it. And I also have the Dryad Arbor Green Sun Zenith combo in here. You can play a forest, play Green Sun Zenith for 0, grab Dryad Arbor, and be on track to ramp from there. I'm moving kind of more into the artifact ramp section. I've got Lotus Petal, Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Emerald of Medallion. Emerald of Medallion is not a ramp package, but it does make all my green spells cost 1 generic mana less to cast, which when I start bouncing things and start getting into playing many spells per turn, it's super, super, super useful and essential.
So with you playing only 4 artifacts in total, and then one of them not even having a mana ability, are you on that collector roof to kind of penalize everybody else?
Some of the ways that I try to abuse the engines in here revolve around making infinite mana, tapping and untapping things, and that means that I need to have artifacts, which I'll get to in a brief second, and those do have activated abilities. So I don't run the oof it was tempting to
It
try to
penalizes
build
you too
around.
much, I see.
Right. If I will say, if I was going to take this down a power level and take some of the more infinite combos out, Oof would definitely have a spot,
Right.
without a doubt in my mind. Moving right along here into the let's talk about some more of the couple remaining artifacts and enchantments that are inside of this deck. This is a super important portion and often is something I'm looking for when I'm mulliganing. A lot of the combos revolve around my creatures being haste enabled. Super important key portion. Let's dive into it here. We've got Lightning Greaves. Commander staple, arguably. Little protection. I can float it back and forth between creatures to give the dorks haste. I've got 1,000-Year Elixir, which is kind of a fun one, and not someone I don't see a ton of play. But the reason you may play the activated abilities of creatures you control as though they had haste. So it doesn't let me attack with those creatures, but I do get to tap them. It also has a kind of neat little nifty ability where one generic and a tap, I can untap a target creature, which is super cool. Very effective. I also have Concordant Crossroads. This is a world enchantment. Just reads that all creatures have haste for 1 green. And then under my last haste enabling bit here, Instill Energy, which is a green. You may untap target creature 1 additional time during your turn. Target creature may also attack this turn it comes into play. This is super cool. I can play it on a high value dork. I can put it on Gilanra to be able to tap it twice per turn, which will give me an extra card draw if I'm dumping it into a card with 6 or greater CMC. Super versatile, super fun.
Yeah. That's definitely the spicy hidden tech right there.
It's
That's
spicy.
sweet.
I also really enjoy the simple art of it. It's really kind of cool. Like I said, haste, super important. Ramp, haste.
So that Lightning Greaves probably really comes into play, having that shroud, so that when you actually have Kodama hit the field, to be able to give that shroud and protection, because I know, at least when I'm playing on the other end, it's like I have to take care of that or else.
Right. One thing to really pay attention to is to not leave Lightning Greaves on a dork as you pass your turn, unless that is the most key component. Being able to equip it to a key portion, which is probably Gilanra or Kodama.
Right.
It's something you want to keep in mind as you're doing your end step or your post main phase. Let's get into the dorks. This is an interesting portion here. So these are the big boys, the big dorks. These are more. These are going to tap for big mana. This is what's going to let us, get all the manas, so to speak, and also make us really, really wish we would have paid attention to math more, because you are going to be doing a bunch of math playing this deck constantly. It's a lot to keep up with. So I'm going to start with some of the lower CMC ones here. Wirewood Symbiote. I'm going to go ahead and read this one because it is pertinent. Return an elf you control to its owner's hand. Untap target creature. Play this ability only once per turn. So I can return an elf to my hand, and let's say, that's also relevant too, because if I got an elf that comes into play and it draws me a card, there's a little bit of tech right there. I can also untap it, which means that I can untap a dork with that taps for big mana, or I can untap Gilanra to give me an extra green, which I can put towards drawing a card. Super versatile, super fun.
So with the Wirewood Symbiote, say, just theoretic, you had 6 elves in play. You have the Wirewood Symbiote. You bring all the elves back, untap Gilanra, tap Gilanra for the green, keep on doing that, and then play Kodama for 6 green built from Gilanra. You will draw 6 cards.
So here's the deal. That would be brilliant if that was the case. I can't do that unless I have a way to bounce Wirewood Symbiote back and forth to the field, because it reads play this ability only once each turn.
I see. Yep.
So it's something I can do every turn, but unless I'm actually bouncing it up and down, it will not recognize it as a new target or new creature. Quirion Ranger, as we move on here, is something kind of similar. It is an elf itself, which Wirewood Symbiote is an insect, which is kind of a drawback, but it is on a body. Quirion Ranger, return a forest you control to its owner's hand. Untap target creature. Use this ability only once per turn. So same thing, same spirit, same kind of, general idea where you are returning, except it's obviously it's a forest you're returning this time. But, with Kodama's triggers, any forest you have in hand, you end up being able to play most of the time anyways. The untap target creature portion is what really is key in this. again, being able to have it be a big value mana dork or Gilanra to draw me an extra card. Land and War Tribe, pretty self-explanatory. Cost 3 green, taps for 3 green. Ley Weaver. Now we're getting into some of the pieces that you got to pay attention to, because some of them are going to start becoming more combo pieces, or the easier, more efficient combo pieces. Ley Weaver is not an elf, unfortunately. It's a human druid. It reads untap 2 target lands. And there's a combo with that we'll get into in a little bit. Mostly, you just kind of think Gaia's Cradle or Nykthos, Shrine of Nyx. Those are the 2 lands I think of when I think of big mana value, and being able to untap those it's just good. It's big good. Karametra's Acolyte, again, not an elf, but it's still worth having in here. Add an amount of green to your mana pool equal to your devotion 2 green. Costs 3, colorless, and a green. It's a great card. Super versatile. This is a card here, moving on, that I'm super pumped about. It just came out. Circle of Dreams Druid. Costs 3 green. It's an elf druid. Tap. Add 1 green for each creature you control. It's it's Gaia's Cradle on a creature. It's super cool. It's very easy to combo with, and compared to some of the other creatures that cost 4, it is 1 CMC less, and it is super cool, super fun. Super glad to have it inside of the deck and playing with it. Moving right along here, same family of things, but a little more specific. We've got Elvish Archdruid. It's an anthem. Other elf creatures you control get +1/+1. I can tap it and add 1 green to my mana pool for each elf I control. Argothian Elder, kind of the same class as Ley Weaver, except it is an elf. Untap 2 target lands. Wirewood Channeler. It's also a 4 CMC card. It's an elf. Add X mana of any 1 color to your mana pool, where X is the number of elves in play. Now the in play portion is really important, because it doesn't matter if the elves are yours or if there's somebody else's dork, you are still getting benefit from that. Which brings me to my next card, Preset Titania. It's an elf. If you didn't know. Tap to add 1 green to your mana pool for each elf on the battlefield. It's great stuff. Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. It's an elf as well. This one is super cool. It's one you got to kind of pay attention to because of its first ability. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power. Something, like I said, you got to watch, because odds are, especially at a cEDH table, no one's going to be playing a creature that has power 6 or greater often, but it does happen. Savala's second ability, pay a green, tap, add X mana and any combination of colors to your mana pool, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, which is hopefully always Kodama.
So that's definitely one you wouldn't mind having be untapped by some of these other creatures and abilities that you've got in here too. That's pretty nice.
It usually taps for a large amount of mana.
An astronomical amount of mana.
It's great. And it's so cool to be able to get this out before I play Kodama, because not only am I going to be able to tap it for the 6 mana because of Kodama's power 6, but I'm also going to be able to draw a card, and I'm usually already drawing at least 1 card from Gilanra, tapping and helping me get Kodama in. It just feels good. It's
being mono green. It's pretty draw hungry, I assume.
Extremely. Draw hungry is an understatement. You're going to draw a lot of cards, that's for sure. So let's talk about some pieces that either help us combo or help us kind of close out. Just 2 things that are on a body. We'll talk about what we're going to pour all of our mana into in a second. But 2 creatures I want to specifically mention. CMC of 7, 4 and 3 green. Nyx Bloom Ancient. It's an enchantment creature, elemental. It reads, trample. If you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. Green. That's all I'm going to say. This card makes our combos, and by our combos I mean making just a plethora of mana just ridiculous. Like I said, a lot of math. This creature hits the field, you're going to be able to get an obscene amount of mana very, very, very easily.
Like, but from what I've seen that you've shown so far, like the Nyx Bloom Ancient doesn't necessarily create infinite mana with like any of the thing I've seen yet, but it creates an astronomically large amount, that's where that
Right.
math comes into play real quick. I could see.
It's unbelievable. You know, there's a lot of times where just the permanents that are on the battlefield, let's say, you know, this deck were to be engineered to just be a higher-ish power and not cEDH type, meaning it's got, you know, no unlimited mana sources. Still, next Bloom Ancient, you're going to be looking at sometimes 47 mana.
Yeah.
Just by what you have on the battlefield. I mean, it's crazy. Let's move into our second big body here. One of my favorite sets. I'll lead off with that. Avacyn Restored. It's the big green guy. It's the 8 CMC, 5 colorless, 3 green creature beast. Haste. Whenever a Crater Hoof Behemoth enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. I mean, it's just, you play this, you're probably closing. If you're not closing, you're closing somebody's life, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, you're, according to the list here, you're running 32 creatures in the deck, so that's definitely, when that comes out, when you're actually choosing to play that card, I can only imagine it's I don't know, you've hit a cumulative massive destruction to be able to win the game usually, or at least take out a player or two at minimum, I'd guess. Like maybe a third player ekes by.
Sure. It's really wild, and it turns some things on. Say we talked for a second about Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. If I've got Kodama on the field, it's tapping for 6. If I've got Nyx Bloom Ancient out on the field, Selvala's tapping for 18. But let's say I've got Crater Hoof out, and I've got a bunch of creatures, and all of a sudden my Kodama's, you know, I don't know, what, a 12/12 easily. Selvala's tapping for 12 mana. I mean, it's, as you're playing these permanents, you got to really keep in mind what you're tutoring for and what's left in your deck creature-wise or permanent-wise that's going to affect your dorks to give them the maximum value of what you can get out of them.
Right, because when I've played against you in this deck, Kodama hits the battlefield and you usually have a couple of permanents out. By the end of that turn, it's usually like an uncountable amount. Like, at least, it's too many things to upkeep with of like, there's that, there's this, I need to watch out for that. It's usually just so many things that it's like extremely overwhelming to be on the other side of the table.
It's a snowball. Usually I can't even fit everything on my playmat. It just gets out of control very quickly. Let's gonna take us into another big body, which is a super fun one to play. Great Oak Guardian. It's a CMC 6, so again we do get it is eligible for a Gilanra target, a draw trigger. It's a creature, tree folk, 5 and 1 green, flash, reach. When Great Oak Guardian enters the battlefield, creatures target player controls gets +2/+2 until end of turn and untap them.
Wow, I've actually never heard of that card.
Sure, yeah. No, it's not one that sees a lot of play, especially in a cEDH pod.
Well, you're running like 15 dorks, so I guess it makes sense.
Right. It majority of the time you're going to be declaring yourself as a target, being able to untap all of your stuffs and be able to tap them again is super great. Plus being able to bounce this back and forth, being able to give your creatures +2/+2. It's a kind of a backup Crater Hoof. Super fun. So
with all of these creatures that you've shown so far, I mean,
sure.
I mentioned before, there's 32 in the list. What protection are you running for these? I mean, because a lot of these are pivotal pieces to you actually closing a game.
So here's the deal. The protection and interaction portion of this deck is super small. I initially had quite a few bits of artifact and enchantment hate. I had some other pieces that were just like an avoid fate, some target permanent protection. But I found that it just made the deck inconsistent with being able to hit the gas pedal. This deck is very interesting to pilot, specifically at a cEDH table, because when you have a window of opportunity, for whatever reason, you have got to be able to blow this entire bit of steam and be able to close it. And having cards that would be quote unquote dead cards in your hand, it wasn't making the deck any bit consistent. So I just went with the strategy of having almost all gas and minimal protection. But we can go into the removal portion of things real quick and take a brief gander into what that looks like. I'm running Veil of Summer.
It's an auto include.
Yeah, I mean,
It's one of the only auto includes out there.
It's just so good. Worst comes to worst, it's a cantrip. Best case scenario, my stuff gets some protection. You know, there is some stipulation with it only having protection from black and from blue, so things like Path to Exile, Swords of Plowshares, I am SOL on, but I will take that trade.
I mean, Veil of Summer for a 1 CMC spell that's an uncommon has so much text on it. Like, it does so many different things. Draw a card, hexproof.
The flavor
Spells
text
can't be
at the
countered.
bottom was literally just one space from the end of the text of the actual card to be able to fit everything on there. It does it all.
Crazy,
it really does. Also, the foil ones are just unbelievably expensive.
Yeah.
Moving on, I've got Heroic Intervention. It's 1 and a green. Instant permanence. You control, gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So for those board wipes, for some spot protection, it's great. Mono green, I'm running it for sure. It's just too efficient to not. Again, I said I don't really run much interaction in this for a reason, but this is just too good to not run. It's fantastic. Also, being able to start a turn off with either one of these creatures, or either one of these cards rather, being Veil of Summer and Heroic Intervention, lets people know, like, you know, this is about to happen.
Yep.
You can use that to, you know, whatever advantage you want. Moving on, we've got Beast Within. Destroy target permanent for 2 and a green. It's not super efficient for what green has to offer. Let's say someone has like a Cursed Totem out. I can't, you know, I'm not playing Magic if that's out. I have to have some removal, and the removal spots that I have, I need to be able to take care of absolutely anything that's a problem. So I'm going with Beast Within. Force of Vigor, super great. Destroy up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. The forces are great. Super great cards. Also, if you don't have a Force of Vigor, pick one up. They're going up in price ridiculously quickly. Kenrith's Transformation. There's some fun hidden tech in this deck with this card. It is actually part of a combo piece, being able to use, I'll get to Cloudstone Curio here in a second, but being able to bounce an enchantment back and forth to my hand if I've got unlimited mana. Being 2 enchantments, I can draw a bunch of cards, but it just shuts down someone's, usually their commander, or let's say they've got like a Razaketh or a Consecrated Sphinx or something that's just getting out of hand. Being able to take care of a creature is just super great. It's justified because it allows me to draw a card.
It's mono green's Gilded Drake.
He who shall not be named.
Yeah.
And then I have Reclamation Sage. This is just, it's woven all through the deck. It's an elf. It's a creature. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. It is everything I want.
Right.
Absolutely. Like I said, the interaction portion of the deck is very, very small. I would definitely say you are going to be getting your politics on for sure playing this deck, but hopefully also against it as well.
It's definitely not reactive protection.
Its reactive bit is gas.
Yeah.
Proactive bit is gas. 2 kind of fun cards here. I've got Vitalize. It's 1 green. It's instant. Untap all creatures you control. It's great. It's Green's Ritual.
1 green.
Yeah, it's Green's Ritual. It's fantastic. It's super strong. I've even held on to it and had all my stuff tapped out except a forest or 2. Someone comes at me with a creature, I untap everything. I've got blockers. Usually 99% of the time it's used as, you know, just a ritual type effect. But it also plays into one of my combos that I'll get into in a second. First, I'll mention its kind of brother, Mobilize. It's a sorcery. Untap all your creatures. So I've got a little bit of redundancy. And as we go through this, you'll realize that every piece in here is basically a redundant bit to another piece. It is very streamlined, for sure. So having 2 of those cards, it's, I don't know. Whenever these get in my hand, it definitely makes things interesting. But like I said, math. It gets out of hand very quickly.
Right.
Let's go ahead, before we get into the combo piece, let's talk about some of our tutors, and let's talk about how we get specific creatures into our hand. We mentioned one already, and that'd be Green Sun Zenith. Green Sun Zenith is super cool, and the fact that you shuffle it back into your library when you play it, it's kind of interesting. You can, it's a recurable piece you could stumble upon again. We've got a natural order. I included it in kind of this bit because being able to pay 2 and 2 green and sacrifice a green creature to be able to go get a green creature out of my library. There are times where I'm going for Hoof, but most of the time I'm going for Nyx Bloom Ancient. It's it's really a neat way to cheat a creature in. It comes at a cost. I have to sacrifice a dork, but let's be honest, how many dorks do I have in here? All of them. Yeah. It's fine. So it's a penalty I'll play every time. Finale of Devastation, which is another haste enabler if I get enough into the X. It's a game closer. It's a tutor. I can get something back out of my graveyard. It's a creature. It does it all. Summoner's Pact, absolutely necessary. Most of the time when I'm even playing this and trying to close, I'm not even worried about having to pay 4. It's at the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 2 and 2 green. If you don't, you lose the game. It doesn't matter. Next turn isn't coming around. Court of Calling, super efficient tutor. You can use an instant speed, and I can convoke some creatures to help me pay for it. Sylvan Tutor, which is Worldly Tutor's brother. Sylvan Tutor is just at a sorcery speed, so you got to really be paying attention to what creature you need and manage your draw triggers accordingly. Worldly Tutor, we're all familiar. Shared Summons is kind of cool. It costs 3 and 2 green, so 5 CMC, and I can search my library at instant speed for 2 different creatures. A couple of my combos to be able to get infinite mana.
Puts them in hand, right?
Yeah, it puts them right in hand. This is a great green version of Ad Nauseam. I'm just holding up mana, waiting for stuff to go around. And then if someone gets to their end step, I play this. I've got the 2 creatures in my hand. I'm ready to roll. I've also got Genesis Wave, which is it's not a tutor, but it is it's the power ball. Yeah. You sink a bunch of mana into it. You dump out a bunch of permanents, which is super cool as well with Gilanra, because if you have a bunch of permanents in your hand and you're putting out a bunch of permanents from Genesis Wave, you can put those into the battlefield with Kodama's triggers. It escalates so quickly, and usually I can close the game when I play this. Right, if I get enough into the X.
That's a strong Hail Mary that it has a lot of receivers.
It's a calculated Hail Mary. Yeah, that's exactly right. Turns Timber Symbiosis. I really love these MDFCs that are recently released from the newest Zendikar set.
The mythic ones that let you have it be into play untapped for pain life.
I ain't messing around with those lands that come into play tapped on a rare occasion. This just lets me go through the top 7 cards and grab a creature, and it comes with some more counters. Kind of cool too, because Walking Ballista is a combo card that I play with, and if I go get Walking Ballista with Turn Timber Symbiosis, I can put it right into play. Walking Ballista doesn't die because it comes in with counters already. Right. Kind of a neat little hidden thing. Interesting, you say. And then I've got Noxious Revival just because probably one of my top favorite 5 green cards. Put a card from a graveyard on the top of its owner's library. It's Phyrexian green, so I can play 2 life or I can pay green. I've denied people so many times something from their draw that they tutored for by putting a land on top of their library. I can use it for a piece that I need to recur. Super versatile. Super fun.
It's mono green recursion that's not regenerate.
Yeah, it is a blast. Let's go ahead and dive into the draw package, shall we? This is, I wouldn't say it's green's like strong suit, efficient draw, but with enough mana, it's definitely there if you know how to use it and abuse it. Sylvan Library is pretty straightforward. I can sift through the first 3, draw them all if I want to pay some life. It's a little slow for my liking. It's a card that can come out and go put something else in if you want. If you're playing at a certain speed, you want to play it.
A card that you're probably a lot happier to have on turn 1 or turn 2, but not 3, 4, 5, 6.
Right. And there was a while where I didn't even play with Sylvan Library in here, play with something else, but it's in here for now. The Great Henge, one of my favorite artifacts that is also green. This is where creature ETBs start to really matter because I can start drawing cards per each creature ETB. Guardian Project, same thing. It's an enchantment. Lets me do the same thing. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, I can draw a card.
Yeah, you were saying the Great Henge is one of your favorite artifacts. I can comfortably say it's my favorite 9 CMC artifact.
It's up there.
It's up there.
It's up there.
She's up there.
It's super good. Life's Legacy. This is one I don't see in a lot of people's lists. First of all, appreciate the foil. It's fantastic. It's a sorcery. 1 and a green. As an additional cost to cast Life Legacy, sacrifice a creature. Draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Now, we've talked a little bit about how we've manipulated some of the power levels of our creatures, but even being able to sacrifice Kodama, how many times have you seen me sacrifice Kodama to this after playing it that turn, just to be able to draw 6 cards and then also be able to play Kodama again for 8, including the tax.
Yeah, I've absolutely been on the receiving end of that.
It's kind of counterintuitive, but it absolutely does work. Beast Within. It's a this is on a body this time, and it's also an elf. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Regal Force. It's another one of the big boys that you really want to search for. It's one that gets tutored up, I'd say more often than not. It's a creature.
It's a good natural order target.
Exactly. Perfect. 4 colorless, 3 greens, an elemental. Whenever Regal Force comes into play, draw a card for each green creature you control. Huge. I mean, it's fantastic.
That's definitely a pet card of yours. I've seen it on the other side of the battlefield quite a few
I own
times.
one foil for a reason. Land of War Visionary. Whenever it enters the battlefield, I can draw a card. It costs 2 and a green. I can also tap it for a green, which if I've got, say the Nyx Bloom Ancient on the field, I can bounce it to my hand. I can pay it for exactly how much mana it's tapping for, and I also get to draw a free card. Absolutely. Elvis Visionary, it's a body, 1 and a green. I can draw a card when it ETBs. And I also have Glimpse of Nature. And this is kind of a cool sorcery, especially for green. Shout out to Kamigawa. It's a 1 green CMC sorcery. Whenever you play a creature spell this turn, draw a card. I'm probably not going to be top decking myself doing this, but I could if I wasn't careful. It can get out of hand. I'm not afraid to play this even turn 3. Even if I know that I'm only going to play 2 creatures, odds are I'll be able to get Glimpse of Nature back into my hand from, say, like an Eternal Witness down the road. And those 2 cards is just a huge advantage. I play it all the time. When I get it in my hand, I usually play it. And then kind of rounding out this section would be Rishkar's Expertise. Super fun sorcery. It's expensive at 4 colorless, 2 green. Again, it's a Gilanra target. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures that you control. You may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So oftentimes with Kodama Field, it's going to let me draw 6 cards or more, as we discussed.
Right.
But here's the deal.
You get trigger, and then a trigger.
Right. I get a Gilanra trigger for casting it. I draw 6 cards. I put a card with a converted mana cost 5 or less from my hand without paying. I think you get it. I can put a permanent in and then get another Kodama trigger to put something else into play. It's phenomenal. Super fun, especially when it resolves. It's great. Super value piece.
Granted, I don't play a lot of green, but I think Rishkar's Expertise might be my favorite green card.
It's super fun. It's really neat. Again, you don't see it in cEDH all that often, but it's in this deck. We've got kind of the next piece, which is one, again, I don't see very often, but it is one that has earned a home in this deck. And that would be a Planeswalker, the only Planeswalker in the deck currently. And that would be Garruk, Caller of Beasts, 4 and 2 green. Again, Gilanra trigger. Draw trigger. It's got +1, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. Put all creature cards revealed this way into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it's always going to fill my hand with creatures, which, again, from our draw packages to our ramping, it's necessary to be filling my hand full. But I also have this ability here. You may put a green creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. What? So I play this card. I get a Gilanra draw trigger. I get a trigger from Kodama and am able to put something into my play, a permanent from my hand into play of 6 or less. And then I get another trigger if I put a creature into play, a green creature into play with its -3 ability. I get another Kodama trigger after that. I mean, it's ridiculous.
The -3 ability, like good contenders are like that Regal Force or that Nyx Bloom Ancient at times if you have the critical mass like Crater Hoof.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's super cool.
What's the emblem ultimate on this guy?
You get an emblem with, whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a creature card, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle your library.
Cool. Well, you've
Seems legit.
yeah, right. You've driven through pretty much all the meat and potatoes of the deck. Run through and kind of explain your win lines here.
Sure, let's get through some of the spice. So we talked about basically the engines of how we get to from A to B, but let's talk about a little bit of how we get those engines maximized fully and the NOS, the NOS of what we're running with here. So I talked briefly before about how we have some bouncing things. You know, one of our engines is creature ETBs, being able to draw a card when we cast a creature. I've got a couple that do exactly that. Teamer Sabertooth, you know, 2 and a green, pretty common card. You see with Dockside lines a lot. It's a cat. You can pay a colorless and a green. You may return another creature you control to its other's hand. If you do, Teamer Sabertooth gains indestructible in a turn. The indestructible part is cool, but what we really care about is returning a creature to our hand. So whether that be like a Hyrax Tower Scout, Eternal Witness. The Scout lets me untap a target creature. The Eternal Witness lets me get a card from my graveyard. So let's say like you know, I'm getting back a Mobilize or a Vitalize to be able to untap all my creatures with Eternal Witness. Maybe the Hyrax Tower Scout, I'm untapping a creature that taps for a bunch of mana. They're ridiculous. They're super strong when I get the right pieces in play. The combo is pretty streamlined and hard to interact with because they're on bodies. I've also got Kogla, the Titan Ape. This is kind of a cool creature out of Ikoria. 3 green, 3 colorless. When Kogla, the Titan Ape, enters a battlefield, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. So there's kind of like some creature removal for me on a body, which has come in super clutch, super handy. It also reads whenever Kogla attacks, destroy a target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. So there's some, again, that cursed totem or whatever it might be that's a real problem. I got to deal with it. Kogla's an answer. It also has an ability that allows me to pay 1 and a green into it. Return target human you control to its owner's hand. Kogla gains indestructible until end of turn. So this limits me to the Tower Scout and the Eternal Witness. Where Teamer Sabertooth, you know, let's say I got a real bad piece of something I have to deal with. I can get back the Reclamation Sage because it's not that stipulation of it being a human. I can turn whatever I want to. I can return the Great Oak Guardian and then play it a bunch more times to get all my creatures +2/+2. The Teamer Sabertooth is a little bit more versatile when it comes to what creatures I can pull up. But the Titan Ape allows me to take care of some of more immediate problems when it itself resolves.
Right. It's like King Kong's brother or something.
It's definitely something. And then I'm running Cloudstone Curio, which is an artifact that costs 3 colorless. I'll read it whenever a non-artifact permanent comes into play under your control. You may return another permanent you control that shares a permanent type with it to its owner's hand. So this gets really interesting because, you know, whether it be an enchantment, me returning, you know, a cheap enchantment and being able to get back Kenra's Transformation and playing it a bunch of times with all of my mana to be able to draw a card, whether it be all my creatures have haste and I'm merely just bouncing 2 dorks back and forth that net me mana.
Oh man, Cloudstone Curio and Kodama too. Just that bounce, play again, play something else, bounce, play again, play something else.
It's pretty neat. I can also, if I can play a land, I can get Gaia's Cradle back into my hand, and then I can play a creature, get another creature into play a creature, Kodama trigger, play Gaia's Cradle as for my Kodama's trigger, and I can make infinite mana so easily, so many ways with Cloudstone Curio. It is so good. The limitation with green is it's very, very hard to tutor for
anything other than
non-creature stuff. So it's something that I have to stumble upon. But again, with enough redundancies with these pieces, you're going to stumble on something. I've got you know, a couple ways to go about utilizing an infinite resource, which in this case would be infinite mana. And if we don't have enough on the board to close it already, I'll talk about one more way that I can sink a bunch of mana into something. Well, we'll go to, I've got 2 artifacts here that are super pertinent to this style. I've got Umrbal Mantle, which this one is not super common. It reads, it's an artifact, it's an equipment. Equipment gets, the equipped creature has pay 3 and untap this creature. It gets a +2/+2 until end of turn, and it costs 0 to equip. So basically, let's say my Elvish Archdruid is tapped. I can pay 3 for this artifact's cost and untap it. And with all the elves that I have, it's not very difficult to net mana and also be able to get a +2/+2. There's also a game closing card because I can equip this to all my creatures after making infinite mana and untap and tap them enough times, at least the ones that are, battle worthy, and close a game that way just through combat damage.
Oh, because the +2/+2.
Sure. And then I also have Staff of Domination, which also costs 3. It was an expensive card, but just recently got reprinted, which is pretty cool. It's an artifact. Pay 1, untap, Staff of Domination. Pay 2, tap it, I can gain a life. Here's the kicker. Pay 3, tap it, untap target creature. So as long as my creatures are tapping for enough mana, or my one creature is tapping for enough mana, I can pay 3 and untap that creature. I can pay 1 also into staff to untap staff and repeat. It's pretty easy. Again, I have to have enough elves, or I have to have a dork that lets me tap for enough to be able to get that fully online, but it's pretty easy to do and very efficient.
Really random topic here. I just realized that Staff of Domination looks exactly like the original Chain of Vapor printing, the staff that he's holding. It looks oddly similar.
Wow. Good catch.
Right.
As I'm looking at that picture right now, I can see it.
Right.
Going on, Staff of Domination has even more abilities on it. Pay 4, tap it, tap target creature. This is one I don't really do all that often, along with the gaining life, but it is pertinent because I can, with infinite mana, I can tap every creature on the battlefield except my own, so I can swing in, arguably unblocked. And then the other kicker for this card, which is just insane, is I can pay 5 colorless, tap it, draw a card. So if I have infinite mana, I can draw my deck.
So, like, say a Circle of Dreams Druid.
Sure.
Like, if you have enough creatures out, that's gonna amount to enough mana for you just to go infinite draw a library.
As long as that creature is haste enabled, I can draw my library. I can gain infinite life.
I mean, basically, as long as you have a Nyx Plumation out and Staff of Domination too, and pretty much all accounts, that's probably going to do it as well.
Right. The Nyx Plumation just makes the combos a lot easier to do. I don't have to have as many creatures, or I don't have to have like a land that taps for so much mana or whatever.
Yeah, so the Umbral Mantle and the Staff of Domination go hand in hand in like the same exact slot, just doing pretty much the same utility.
Again, with green, it's hard to tutor for certain things, so I go with the line of just having redundancies. In most of my deck building, I have 2 to 4 different engines or ways to get to those engines, and if I don't have pieces that are tutorable for, that are efficient, I just have many redundancies that provide me some level of value immediately, and are just pieces that I have to stumble upon. That's part of why this deck is so draw hungry. Let's talk about the big machine gun boy. Something to pump all your mana into if you can't, for whatever reason, go with attack damage. Walking Ballista. I think most people are familiar with this. I can pump in a ridiculous amount of mana and put counters on this artifact creature, and I can remove counters from it and deal damage to a creature or player. There's times where I've played this without the intent of going with infinite mana. I just pump 12 mana into it and kill someone's Timna and kill someone's, whatever.
So that's probably one of the better win lines for you because it's tutorable.
It's pretty efficient.
Green tutors, anyways.
Right. Something like Green Sun Zenith I can't do because it's not green.
Right.
But a lot of the creature tutors I can. That's part of why it's so good. Real quick, kind of rounding down to the land tutors and then lands. We've got a big portion of some of our combos do involve lands. We talked about the Argothian Elder, which untaps 2 target lands. We talked about the Ley Weaver, which untaps 2 target lands. Let's talk further into what that looks like and why that's super important. to get to the lands that we want to see, we've got crop rotation, decent stable, see it a lot. Sack a land, get whatever land you want, put it on the battlefield. We have Elvish Reclaimer. It's an elf, 1 CMC. I can pay 2 and tap Elvish Reclaimer. I can sack a land as part of the cost. Search my library. Put any land on the battlefield tapped.
So for the most part, these are going to be grabbing a Gaia's Cradle, right?
That's the thing. It's interesting because most of the time, yes, I am grabbing a Gaia's Cradle, but I've also got a couple lands that I'll hint on here in just a second that'll give us a little bit of a better idea of some of the other routes that I can take if I need to. There's a lot of versatility with the land package inside of this, and that's part of why the tutors to get to different lands are so important.
Cool. That's interesting.
Yeah, I've also got Sylvan Scrying. It's just a sorcery. Search your library for a land card, reveal it, put it into my hand.
Cool. So, being a low density color, you're mono green, you're afforded the ability to run some like utility lands. What are some of those looking like in this?
Sure. I've got, start off here real simple. We've mentioned Dryad Arbor already.
Green Sun Zenith to Dryad Arbor.
Right. It feels really great to be able to sacrifice this to like a natural order or something too, because it's not something that's I'm particularly ever attached to.
Right.
It just provides me the versatility with like Crater Hoof Behemoth to get the extra creature or whatever it might be.
Yeah, a lot of things.
I've got Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, one of the most recent additions. I have tried to update this deck. I mentioned Circle of Dreams Druid. This deck has seen several different renditions, and it definitely is effective with every set that comes out. There's always 2 cards that come in. The Yavimaya Cradle of Growth just makes all lands forests, in addition to the other types, which helps with some of the colorless lands that I have, keeping them online. I have Wirewood Lodge. This one's super fun. Tap, add 1 colorless mana to my mana pool, or I can pay a green and tap it and untap target elf, which if I have a Gaia's Cradle on the field and I have an Argothian Elther or Leyweaver, if I have Gaia's Cradle and I have Wirewood Lodge, that's an infinite combo as long as I have enough creatures that Gaia's Cradle taps for the appropriate amount. Kind of a little bit of hidden tech
hidden
there.
Spice.
Extra spice. These are 2 that I find myself tutoring for often with my land tutors, and that would be Bonder's Enclave and War Room. Bonder's Enclave is a land where I can tap it for a colorless, or I can pay 3, tap it, draw a card, activate this ability only if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, which in this deck is not entirely hard to do at all. Being able to draw a card after I play, say a Worldly Tutor or a Sylvan Tutor, and I need that draw, or I just need draw period, it's great to be able to have draw on a land. Very hard to mess with, very hard to interact with. War Room, same idea. Tap it for colorless, or pay 3, tap it. Pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity. For me would be 1. Draw a card. Super great. Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. This one saw a lot of play in multiple different formats. I think it's a great card. It's a devotion land. Tap it for a colorless, or I can pay 2 and tap it, choose a color, add to your mana pool an amount of mana equal to that devotion, your devotion to that color. It's kind of the Gaia's Cradle complementary piece. Oftentimes, though, Nykthos will tap for more mana than Gaia's Cradle.
Right.
I also have Centaur Garden. We've talked a lot, Isaac, tonight about being able to manipulate our creature's power to affect draw cards or mana abilities. Centaur Garden is kind of cool. I can tap it, add 1 green to my mana pool. It deals 1 damage to me. Or if I have Threshold, I can tap 1 green and tap it, sacrifice Centaur Garden, target creature gets +3/+3 until a turn.
Or even sometimes you can just encourage somebody else to attack the ad nos player, like I'll buff it by 3.
Sure, I absolutely would do that. Castle Garenbrig, pet land of mine. It enters the battlefield tapped unless I control a forest. I can tap it for a green, or I can put 2 colorless and 2 green into it, tap it, add 6 green to my mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells. So this kind of makes up that little bit of a gap between Gilanra and Kodama. Between Gilanra and Kodama. It works out super well and is super efficient. I also am running Ancient Tomb. This just allows me to if I draw it or if I have it in my opening hand, if I play a forest and I play Ancient Tomb, it just ensures that I get Gilanra on turn 2. And then I am just running
16.
Believe 16.
Yep, 16.
Forests.
And then
yeah, that brings me to kind of the end of the actual list of things. Again, to kind of recap, the idea is to ramp, draw as many cards as I can, manage my draw triggers and ETB triggers with Gilanra as to what permanents I'm putting out on the field, in an attempt to maximize how much mana I get from my dorks, and pay attention to the board state to know when I can play my combo pieces and bouncing pieces that allow me to get infinite mana or draw or whatever it might be, and make sure I hold on to those at the right time and play them at the right time when I get my window.
Right. So, as alluded to at the beginning of the video, this deck snowballs really hard.
Very quickly.
And obviously you've shown us and kind of explained how all those things happen at a very rapid rate and how to get there. With that also being said, what are some of your Achilles heels of the deck? What are some of the things that are like that hard stop, hard counter, really hard for the deck to play through?
Good.
Putting you on the spot, of course.
Absolutely. So board wipes. Board wipes are super difficult to play through. Thankfully, my commander's going back to the command zone. I can attempt to build my board state pretty quickly. That's one thing I wanted to do with this deck, is no matter what cards I'm drawing, I'm basically, again, with the amount of redundancy that I have in the game, instead of being able to counteract a board wipe, which is kind of hard to do in green with the exception of Heroic Intervention and a couple other cards, I have to be able to rebuild my board state within a turn or two. So what does that look like? I've got to be able to put out enough lands to be able to draw into pieces, and I have to be able to play my commanders. And if I have, say, like a Draenith Magistrate on the field, that's usually a decent target for me to try to Beast Within or to play a Kenrith Transformation on. Stacks are difficult. Rule of Law effects are very difficult to play around and are difficult to navigate, and I usually have to recruit some help and politic my way out of that. Again, given any kind of small window, this deck has to be able to perform. So whether that be turn 3 or whether that be turn 7 after a long battle of people dropping all their counter magic back and forth, it's very interesting to pilot, because you really have to pay attention to what you're playing against, and even playing everything at the most efficient rate and dropping everything out of my hand as quickly as possible, honestly, Isaac, is sometimes not the answer.
Yeah.
I do not want to scare the board immediately. If I have all the gas in the world and I know that even if a few pieces get taken care of, I can still go off, sure, dump all your stuff at me. It doesn't matter. I want to drain it out as soon as possible. But keeping my hand with the right pieces in play, it's just that calculated window of opportunity that I have to really pay attention to.
I mean, at its core, it's a storm deck. Like, it's a pretty damn proactive storm deck.
Very much so. The pieces you also got to look out for, I think I've mentioned before, is Curse Totem. That's the biggest one. Things that turn off creature abilities, wrath type effects.
Some of the things that I've noticed that I do when I'm playing against you in this deck is I'll be more cognizant of that turn 1 Curse Totem. I'm usually keeping that if I have it in that. I'm usually keeping that hand that has it. I find myself tutoring for Cyclonic Rift a lot. Or silence effects, whether it be silence or Ranger Captain of Eos. Those seem to be pretty powerful stops. But I've even found myself using silence at times that really aren't practical or don't make much sense, just in fear of I just, there's so much that could happen right now, and he may not have any way of getting there, but I can't assume that. I just I have to play the silence just to ensure he can't. It does kind of force me to play weird around it, which is really tricky to figure out. Like I genuinely don't know how to play against your deck. It's interesting.
Right. I think that kind of the challenge and also part of the fun of playing aggro, and I do consider this to be an aggro deck. You have so much control in the game by what permanents you put out, how many permanents you put out, and on what turn you put them out.
Right.
Because what you are doing with playing an aggro deck is you are taking a target and you are putting it right smack dab in the middle of your forehead. And you are saying, this is the pace at which this game will be played. And you are all going to play it at this pace, or you're going to pay the price. You have to be able to back that up for sure, but you don't want that target to be so big that you have 3 enemy players, opponents, rather, that are throwing all of their resources into stopping you because you will punt.
I mean, yeah, the definite sheer time for this deck going for the win is on the tail end of somebody else attempting it. Like that is like a sheer locked in. Like if somebody just cast an ad nause and went all the way in and didn't secure the W off of it, that next turn is like the biggest green light you can get in this deck because it will not be stopped. It's like everybody's counter magic will be spent, and yeah, you're going to surely take home the W.
Right. Something that is a problem that I got to really pay attention to is someone plays like a Narset or something that only lets me draw 1 card per turn. That is arguably the worst thing that can happen. Yeah. Also, one of the benefits of this deck that I want to talk about is even if my combos get shut down, we talked about like the Kogla, Temur Sabertooth, Tower Scout, Eternal Witness, Cloudstone Curio type stuff. Even Staff of Domination. Like, I am still putting out massive bodies on the field.
Yeah.
Even the dorks, you look at them and they're only 1 or 2 or 3 power, but all of a sudden you have 10 of those and people don't really pay much attention to it, to little pings here and there.
Yeah.
But it adds up very, very, very quickly. And like I said, even if the infinite resource combos get taken out of the equation, let's say someone plays a correct collector oof, which is one I talked about before, it shuts down a lot of my combos and a lot of my value pieces for making, mass amounts or infinite amounts of something. It usually doesn't matter. I can still play the majority of the deck and be just
in turn, like the deck can play through a lot of like that mid range as long as there's not a lot of stacks, right?
Correct. Yep. And like I said, there always is going to be a challenging bit to piloting a deck like this that is so streamlined into one specific avenue of playing the game, and that is limited interaction, all gas. It's like I said, it's difficult to pilot. It's a simple deck, but it's difficult to pilot. Once the reason where you have to be calculated with when you try to go for what you're trying to do.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 questions I'm going to put you on the spot with.
Please.
First question being, what is one of your favorite cards to have in a turn 1 hand?
Sure.
And then second question being, in this deck specifically, what's like your favorite pet card?
Great question. It sounds simple, but I really get excited to have any of my dorks in hand, specifically when I hit the Elvish Mystic, Finhorn Elf, or Llanowar Elf.
So really anything that's a 1 CMC that's going to enable you to get the Gilanra turn 2.
Right.
Is essential for getting the ball rolling at the pace you need to be.
Nothing's worse than seeing like a Gaia's Cradle in hand and maybe like a Priest of Titania, and there's just nothing.
All great pieces
else.
At the wrong times.
Yeah, there's like nothing else that I can do. I've got 5 lands after that. That's the worst. I keep the land count pretty low on this because I am drawing so many cards, and I have to have cards that are providing me value.
You got 27, including a modeled face card.
It's low. It's very low. Yeah. I think it's it is painfully low, but it usually can play out just fine. But you cannot be afraid to mulligan down to 6.
Yeah.
You can't be afraid to mulligan down to 5, even if you need. It is more important to be able to play Gilanra on turn 2 than it is to make sure that you have all the cards that you really want to see at different points in the game. You are focused on what is in front of you, and that is your turn 1 and turn 2 plays.
Cool.
The rest of it is redundant enough to follow.
Sure. And then pet card, or just favorite card overall to have in the deck.
I'll list maybe maybe one from each category.
Sure.
Vitalize, again, the 1 CMC green instant. Untap all creatures you control. A ritual in green feels super, super cool. From the draw section, I really like Life's Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
I have to, again, it's when I have to sacrifice a creature to draw cards equal to its power, but it's always fun, and watching people's reaction as I sacrifice my own Kodama to it after I just play Kodama. They're like, what? It's just fun. It's spicy. The Garuk, Caller of Beasts, it's one that I don't know how long it'll be in the deck and possibly replaced by something better, but it's a Planeswalker that costs 6 that is in a very good deck. It's more of a pet card, and it is super, super fun to be able to play and then activate. I get a thoroughly good enjoyment out of it. I will say that Nyx Blue Mansion is one of my bigger boys to get out, just because it starts making math a lot easier. Initially, it makes it a lot harder, but it puts my combos on a lot quicker, and I have to do a lot less math. I will say, if you make a deck that's even somewhat close to being like this, play test it a bunch and make sure you know what cards, what creatures you're tutoring for, why you're tutoring for them, and how much mana you are going to be able to make and generate from that, and when you should or should not be tapping certain dorks to make that happen.
Cool. Wonderful, man. I really appreciate you running over the deck.
Absolutely.
For this. I'm glad this is one that we chose to do, because I've always thought this deck was super fascinating. I also, it's ironic, you and I both built Gilanra around the same time, and it kind of like unveiled it and was like, wait, you did it too?
Yeah.
I went with a very casual build. He went with a very high power build. It's a really cool deck. It's very fun to watch this deck snowball. It's just extremely explosive. It's like, you just, when I'm on the opposite end of the table watching Aaron play this and he's doing that small ball turn, like I just see like this massive hand of cards and his eyes just going back and forth, just like super hyper focusing, like I can do this,
Carry the one.
I'm gonna do this, like doing all this math, just like extreme focus. It's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, trying to keep track of like how much one dork taps for, and then the creature that I'm about to tutor for, how is that going to change, and do I have a haste enabling piece, or can I get a haste enabling piece? All of it. It's just, it's a lot to keep up with, and it's fun. With this deck at a cEDH table, you're not going to win every time, but you are definitely going to get a hold of your 25% win rate.
Right. Wonderful. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us. Appreciate everybody that's still stuck around and watched to this point in the video or listened in on this point. We're going to kind of continue doing content like this, doing deck techs, top 10 videos. We really want
Super
to
fun.
Just create more content. It's been really fun for us creating content, actually. I think we're starting to learn things about each other's decks, as well as, and we're starting to figure some different things out, and it's because of creating this. And hopefully it does the same thing for some of you guys that are watching in or listening in. But yeah, by all means, if you feel inclined, like, subscribe, share, comment, whatever. Any of those things help get traffic to the videos so that we can produce more. We want to ramp up our production quality as I learn how to edit videos more and get actual mics. Things like that will all help immensely of making the quality of these videos better.
Sure, and do comment. I mean, we had a couple people that mentioned a few things about a previous video, and it's changed how we do videos now. They mentioned a couple things about it, more information that they wanted, and we have tried to include that, and it makes total sense. And it's also challenged us and even challenged our deck building a little.
Yeah, absolutely. And even too, if you have questions at all, go in the comments of the video, ask there, or even we will have the deck link linked in the bottom of the description. Go in there as well. You can ask comments directly on the deck link. I think all of us, like Aaron, Kevin, and myself, we're all on our Moxfields pretty often and love to answer questions on there. It's a really good platform if you're not using Moxfield, so get on there. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your guys' day.
Take care.